There are things we never plan to tell anyone, secrets we swear to take to our graves. This is one of them. What I found buried in our backyard that summer night in 1958 destroyed everything I believed to be true about my marriage and changed my life forever. Hello, my dears. I'm Eleanor Williams, 86 years old now. But this story I'm sharing today happened when I was just 27. Before I begin, I'd like to ask you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps tremendously. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's listening to my stories. My marriage to Theodore Williams had already lasted 12 years when it all happened. Back then, in Pine Hollow, a small town in rural Pennsylvania, my husband was practically a celebrity. The only pharmacist in the region, always well-dressed, educated, respected by everyone. People called him Doctor, even without the title. And me? I was just Dr. Williams' wife. I was never Ellie, I was always the wife of... Our house was behind the pharmacy, a beautiful home with a large backyard full of apple trees his father had planted. We had a comfortable life by the standards of the time. The only cloud in our seemingly happy sky was that we didn't have children. Oh, how that hurt me. In those days, a childless woman was seen as incomplete, flawed. People whispered, made malicious comments, looked with pity. "Poor thing, sterile," they'd say when they thought I wasn't listening. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Gertrude Williams, made a point of reminding me during every visit that I hadn't given an heir to her precious son. Theodore said it was divine will, that we should accept it. Even so, he prepared a special tonic for me every day to help your fertility, my dear, he would say as he handed me the bitter liquid that I faithfully took every morning for years on end. The pharmacy was his pride, a family inheritance for 3 generations. Theodore knew every bottle, every herb, every formula. Our routine was predictable. He woke up at 6 key, we had breakfast together. He opened the pharmacy at 8 teeth, closed for lunch at noon, returned at 2 bassi, and worked until 6 gang. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, he went to Philadelphia for medications and novelties. He always returned on the same train at 10 p.m. That had been the rhythm of our lives for 12 years until that June night in 1958. A night I'll never forget, even now, almost 6 decades later. It was raining heavily, one of those winter rains that make you curl up under blankets and thank God for having a roof. I had gone to bed early, as usual. Theodore said he would stay in the living room, reviewing some medical books he had bought. I woke up startled by a strange noise. At first, I thought it was the rain, perhaps a broken branch, but no. It was a rhythmic, metallic sound coming from the backyard. By the clock on the bedside table, I saw it was exactly 3:00 a.m. I got up slowly, careful not to make noise. Theodore wasn't in bed. I approached the window, pulled back the curtain just enough to peek outside, and what I saw chilled my blood. Under the pouring rain, illuminated only by the weak light of the waning moon that occasionally appeared between the clouds, was my husband, digging frantically, as if his life depended on it. He wore gloves, something I found strange, since Theodore always took pride in his clean, well-kept pharmacist's hands. "My hands are my work instruments," he used to say. I watched as he finally stopped digging. He looked around as if checking if he was being observed. I quickly moved away from the window, my heart beating so hard I was afraid he might hear it. When I looked again, I saw him placing a box in the hole, an ordinary cardboard shoebox. Then he covered it with soil and carefully smoothed the area, scattering some leaves on top. I went back to bed and pretended to sleep. When he entered the bedroom soaking wet, he went straight to the bathroom. I heard the shower, then the sink water running for a long time. When he lay down beside me, I noticed his hands were red from scrubbing. The soap smell couldn't completely mask another odor. Wet earth. The next morning, I acted normally. Prepared breakfast, served his buttered toast, accepted the tonic he offered me, although for the first time I had doubts about that liquid. I watched him discreetly. He seemed tired, with deep circles under his eyes, but acted as if nothing had happened. When he left for the pharmacy, I ran to the backyard. The rain had eased, but the ground was soaked. Even so, I could identify where he had dug. The strategically placed leaves, the slightly darker soil, but I didn't have the courage to dig up whatever it was. What if it was something illegal? What if he noticed I knew? I decided to wait and observe. To my surprise, the scene repeated the next night. Exactly at 3 a.m., Theodore slipped out of bed stealthily, thinking I was asleep. Again the sound of the shovel against earth, again him burying something. This time it wasn't raining, and I could see better. Was it the same shoebox? I wasn't sure. On the third night, it happened again, and on the fourth, always at the same time, always with the same meticulous care, always in that part of the backyard under the apple trees. My husband was burying something in series night after night, and my fear was growing. On the fifth night, I made a decision. I needed to know what was happening. When he left, I didn't go to the window. Instead, I heard the car starting. Theodore was leaving. I ran to the front window in time to see our 1952 Ford driving down the main road. This was strange, very strange. He never went out at night except on Tuesdays and Thursdays to get medications, and always returned on the 10 p.m. train. I wrote down the time on a piece of paper, left at 11:45 p.m. I sat in the living room, nervously embroidering, waiting. He returned at 2:30 a.m. I heard the car, the doors, his steps entering the house silently, taking something from the pantry, probably the shovel, and going out to the backyard. The same ritual as every night. That early morning, I couldn't sleep anymore. When he finally came to bed, he pretended to be in a deep sleep, but my mind was racing. What was my husband hiding? Why the secrecy? Why so much care? The next morning, while he was showering, I did something I had never done in 12 years of marriage. I searched his pockets. In the jacket he had worn the night before, I found a receipt from a hotel in Philadelphia, the Bellevue Hotel, and a woman's handkerchief with the initial I delicately embroidered in the corner. The perfume on the handkerchief wasn't just any perfume. It was Chanel No. 5, very expensive, that only high society women wore. For the first time in our marriage, I tasted the bitter flavor of betrayal. The pieces started to fit together, but the puzzle was still incomplete. Why bury evidence of an affair in the backyard? Why not simply dispose of them some other way? I decided I needed to see the contents of that box, but I would have to be careful. I waited until Friday, when Theodore had a meeting with the laboratory representative who came from Philadelphia. The only occasion when I knew exactly where he would be for at least 2 hours. As soon as he left, I grabbed a shovel from the pantry and went to the backyard. The ground was damp, but not waterlogged, which made my job easier. I dug exactly where I had seen him bury the box the night before. It didn't take long to find it. A simple cardboard shoebox wrapped in a plastic bag to protect it from moisture. With trembling hands, I brought it inside. I sat at the kitchen table, took a deep breath, and opened the box. What I found inside would change my life forever. Inside were letters, 11 letters to be exact, each dated from the previous month, in a sequence running from July of last year to May of this year. 11 consecutive months, the most recent from just 2 days ago. All written on thin, light blue paper with a delicate, feminine handwriting, and all signed by the same name, Isabella Vincent. I began to read the first letter, dated July 1957. "My dear Theodore," it began, "I cannot express the happiness I feel each time we meet. These stolen moments are what keep me alive." It was a love letter, a passionate letter from a woman to her lover, my husband. I read the second letter from August and the third. Each told a little more of their story, how they met when he went to pick up medications at the Philadelphia hospital where she worked as a nurse, how their meetings became more frequent, how he promised that one day they would be together. In the sixth letter from December came the first bombshell. "My love, the news I have to give you is wonderful. Even if it has come at a complicated time, I am pregnant. Our child grows inside me." I know now you will have to hasten your plans to leave your wife. My whole body trembled reading that. A child. Theodore would have a child with another woman, while I, his wife, cried for not being able to get pregnant. The following letters showed the evolution of the pregnancy, but also a growing desperation. In February, I'm already 4 months along. Soon it will start to show. I can't hide it at the hospital anymore. I need an answer from you. When will you tell her? When can I stop being your secret? In March. Theodore, I am desperate. My family is suspicious. At the hospital, there are already rumors. You promised that everything would be resolved by January. It's March and you keep postponing. In April. I feel the baby move. It's a boy, I'm sure. I want to name him Gabriel. But sometimes I wonder if he will ever know his father. Your excuses no longer convince me. You said your wife is sterile, that there would be no problems with the divorce. What are you waiting for? And the last letter from May, just 2 days ago, broke my heart. Not for me, but for that poor woman. This is my last letter. I can no longer bear living in this lie. You never intended to leave your wife, did you? All this time they were just empty words. I am alone, pregnant, rejected by my family, about to lose my job. I see no way out. By the time you read this, I will have departed this world with our son. I can't bear living like this anymore. I hope someday you feel at least a little of the pain I'm feeling now. Goodbye, Isabella. It was as if an abyss had opened beneath my feet. A pregnant woman threatening to take her own life because of my husband. And another equally devastating revelation. You said your wife is sterile. Sterile? I was never sterile. Theodore convinced me to take a fertility tonic that he prepared himself every day for years. A chill ran down my spine as a terrible suspicion began to form in my mind. I carefully put the letters back in the box, exactly as I found them. I reburied the box in the same place, smoothing the earth as he did. I went back inside and took a long shower, trying to process everything I had discovered. I cried under the shower where no one could hear my sobs. When I composed myself, I knew what I needed to do. I wouldn't confront Theodore immediately. Something told me to act with caution. I continued pretending I knew nothing, serving coffee with the same smile as always. But the tonic he offered me the next morning, I threw away when he wasn't looking. I needed to know more, needed concrete proof before confronting him. And most importantly, I needed to find out what happened to Isabella. That last letter, could it be possible that she really... I couldn't simply ask Theodore. I would have to investigate on my own. And that's what I did. But that's another part of the story I'll tell you in the next video. If you want to know what I discovered about Isabella and how I confronted Theodore, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Thank you for listening to me this far. It's not easy to relive these memories, but sharing this story might help other women going through similar situations. After discovering Isabella's letters buried in the backyard, I couldn't look at Theodore the same way anymore. Each smile, each loving gesture now seemed like a lie. While I cried for not being able to get pregnant, he not only had an affair with another woman, but had gotten her pregnant and worse, possibly driven her to suicide. But I needed more information. I needed to understand exactly what was happening. First, that tonic he gave me. If I was never sterile, as Isabella mentioned in her letters, then what exactly had I been taking all these years? The next day, I took advantage of Theodore being busy with a laboratory representative who came monthly and took a sample of the tonic to David for analysis. David was the young pharmacy assistant, recently graduated, who greatly admired Theodore. He wouldn't suspect if I asked naturally. David, can you do me a favor? I've been taking this tonic for so many years and got curious about its composition. Could you analyze it for me? Don't mention it to Theodore. I want to surprise him. Show him that I'm taking an interest in his work. The young man smiled excitedly at being able to help. Hours later, when I returned to the pharmacy, his eyes were wide. He pulled me to the back, away from customers' ears. Mrs. Williams, this contains substances that prevent pregnancy. It's basically a potent contraceptive. Whoever is taking this will never get pregnant while continuing to use it. Where did you get this? The floor seemed to disappear beneath my feet. For 12 years, every day my own husband had given me a contraceptive, pretending it was a fertility tonic. 12 years of tears for not being able to get pregnant. 12 years believing there was something wrong with me. All a deliberate, cruel, and calculated lie. It's a formula I found in Mr. Williams's old books. I was just curious, I replied, trying to maintain my composure while my world collapsed. I thanked David and asked him not to mention it to anyone. He promised, still confused but respecting my request. I returned home like a sleepwalker. The betrayal was even deeper than I had imagined, but there was still Isabella. That last letter, had she really? I decided I needed to find out. The next day, I invented a doctor's appointment in Philadelphia. Theodore didn't question it. He never questioned when it came to my reproductive health. Now I understood why. I took the 7:30 train, arriving in Philadelphia at 9 m. St. Mercy Hospital was imposing, a 3-story building in the center of the city. My heart was racing as I climbed the marble steps. At reception, I tried to appear casual. "Good morning. I'd like to speak with Nurse Isabella Vincent. She took care of my cousin last week, and I want to thank her personally." The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with glasses on the tip of her nose, looked at me with an expression I'll never forget. A mixture of grief and discomfort. "You didn't know? Nurse Isabella? She jumped from the Delaware River Bridge 3 days ago. She was pregnant. A horrible tragedy." The impact of those words made me lean on the counter to avoid falling. So it was true. Isabella's last letter wasn't just a desperate threat. She had really taken her own life and that of the baby she carried. "Are you all right?" asked the receptionist, noticing my paleness. "Yes, just shocked. I had no idea. Poor girl. And the father of the child? Nobody knows who he was. She never told anyone. She left only a letter for the family, saying she could no longer bear the shame. They say it was a married man. Those scoundrels." She interrupted herself, remembering the formality. "Forgive me. It's just that we worked together for 5 years. She was such a sweet, dedicated girl." I left the hospital dazed, walking aimlessly through the streets of Philadelphia. Everything made sense now. The last letter, Theodore's anguish digging in the backyard at 3 a.m. He wasn't just cheating. He had driven a woman and his own child to suicide. I sat on a park bench and cried. I cried for Isabella. I cried for the baby who would never be born. I cried for my destroyed dreams of being a mother. I cried for the 12 years living a lie. When the train returned to Pine Hollow at 4:00 p.m., I had already dried my tears. The pain had given way to a cold determination. I wouldn't confront Theodore immediately. Something told me to act with caution, to investigate more. In the following days, I maintained a facade of normality that required all my strength. I smiled, prepared his favorite meals, accepted his kisses, all while planning my next steps. The tonic I threw away when he wasn't looking. I began to pay attention to the smallest details. I noticed that Theodore kept a strange key at the bottom of his sock drawer. Small, old, it didn't seem to open any door in our house. One day, while he was at the pharmacy, I tried it in all the locks I could find. Nothing. Then I remembered the attic. There was an old chest up there that belonged to his family, always locked. Theodore said it contained only unimportant pharmacy documents. The key fit perfectly. Inside the chest, I found something that froze my blood. Letters? More letters, but not from Isabella. These were from another woman, Claire Mitchell. They dated from 5 years ago, 1953. They followed the same pattern as Isabella's letters: a secret passion, promises to abandon the sterile wife, a pregnancy, and then growing desperation. In the last letter, dated December 1953, Claire begged, "Theo, I can't wait any longer. I'm 7 months along. My family kicked me out. I lost my job at the school. You promised we would be together before Christmas. What do I tell our child when he's born and asks about his father? Along with the letters, there was a yellowed newspaper clipping from the Philadelphia Inquirer dated January 1954. The headline read, "Young unwed mother attempts suicide." The article told how Claire Mitchell, 22, a former elementary school teacher, had tried to kill herself by taking rat poison. She survived, but lost the 8-month-old baby. The photo showed Claire pale in a hospital bed. According to the newspaper, after the incident, she left the city dishonored and devastated, moving to the West Coast. It was a pattern, a terrible and cruel pattern. Theodore seduced vulnerable women, got them pregnant, promised to leave his sterile wife, and then abandoned them. Claire survived but lost everything. The baby, her reputation, her future. Isabella didn't endure and took her own life along with the babies. And I was the central piece in this perverse machinery. The deceived wife deliberately kept childless so that the pharmacy inheritance, which came from his family, wouldn't be divided in case of divorce, as he himself would explain later. For 2 weeks, I continued my silent investigation. I copied Claire's letters and Isabella's. I kept samples of the tonic in small bottles that I hid at my only trusted friend's house, Charlotte. At the county property records office, I discovered something intriguing. Theodore owned a small house on the outskirts of town that he never mentioned to me. Using the excuse of visiting a sick cousin, I got a free afternoon to investigate this place. The house was simple, hidden among trees, about a half-hour's walk from town. The lock wasn't difficult to open. I learned a few tricks watching Theodore over the years. What I found inside left me breathless. It was a house prepared for a family. Not an abandoned house or used as storage, but a real home ready to be inhabited. In the living room, new furniture covered with sheets to protect from dust. In the kitchen, utensils still in packaging. And in the main bedroom, a crib. A crafted wooden crib with a mobile of stars hanging. In the dresser drawers, more letters from Isabella, more recent than the buried ones. In one from just a month ago, she wrote, "I can't wait for us to move into our little house. I've already planned everything for Gabriel's room. Will he have your eyes?" Theodore had prepared a house to live with Isabella and the baby. He had made concrete plans, bought furniture, set up a crib, but something went wrong. Maybe he changed his mind at the last minute. Maybe he became a coward when thinking about facing the scandal, the loss of reputation, the division of assets. And Isabella, realizing he would not fulfill the promise, even with the love nest already prepared, saw only one way out. I photographed everything with the camera I borrowed from Charlotte, each room, each detail of the house, each letter, concrete evidence of what was happening. Back at our house, I kept the photographs along with copies of the letters. Now I had a complete dossier on Theodore's lies. But what would I do with it? Confronting him directly seemed dangerous. If he was capable of deceiving 3 women for so many years, what else might he be capable of? That night, lying next to the man I thought I knew, but who revealed himself to be a cruel stranger, I made my decision. I couldn't continue living that lie for one more day. The next morning, after Theodore left for the pharmacy, I put my plan into action. But what happened next was even more surprising and terrifying than anything I had already discovered. After discovering the house Theodore had prepared for Isabella and the baby, I couldn't sleep properly anymore. How could I share a bed with a man who not only cheated on me, but for 12 years made me believe I was sterile while giving me contraceptives disguised as tonic? A man who drove a pregnant woman to suicide and another to attempt to take her own life. That July morning in 1958, after Theodore left for the pharmacy, I made the decision that would change the course of my life. I wouldn't run away like a criminal. I wouldn't hide as if I had done something wrong. I would confront him, but I needed to protect myself. First, I gathered all the evidence I had collected. Copies of Isabella's and Claire's letters, photographs of the secret house, samples of the tonic. I put everything in a folder that I hid at Charlotte's house, my only true friend. If anything happened to me, she would know what to do. Then I wrote 3 identical letters detailing everything I had discovered. I sent one to Judge Mendez, the county judge, who wasn't a close friend of Theodore like the local sheriff. Another to the State Board of Pharmacy. The third I left with Charlotte to be opened only if I didn't show up for 3 days. "Are you sure, Ellie?" Charlotte asked, concerned for my safety. Her green eyes, always so serene, now overflowed with worry. "I am. I can't live in this lie anymore. And if something happens to me, at least the truth will come out." I went home and prepared dinner as I always did. I cooked the steak that Theodore liked so much with red wine sauce. I set the table with our best tablecloth, lit candles, placed flowers. It would be our last dinner together, although he didn't know it yet. At 6:30, I heard the front door. Theodore entered, surprised by the prepared environment. "What are we celebrating?" he asked, hanging up his jacket. "The truth," I replied simply. He smiled without understanding. He sat at the table while I poured the wine. I maintained my composure, serving food, talking about trivialities. I would wait for the right moment. After dinner, while we were having coffee in the living room, I put my plan into action. I casually got up and took the shoebox that I had dug up from the backyard that afternoon, the original, not the copy. I placed it on the coffee table along with the tonic bottle and the analysis David had done. "What is this?" Theodore asked, although his face already showed he knew exactly what it was. "Why, Theodore?" I asked calmly, surprising myself with my tranquility. "Why prevent me from being a mother while getting other women pregnant?" The silence that followed was deafening. I saw his face go through a series of emotions: surprise, fear, anger, and finally, a calculating coldness I had never noticed before. "How long have you known?" he asked, without denying anything. "Long enough to understand everything." "Isabella? Claire? How many more were there, Theodore?" He didn't answer immediately. He took a long sip of coffee, placed the cup on the table, and stared at me with eyes I didn't recognize. Cold eyes of a stranger. "The pharmacy is my family inheritance. If we had children, you would be entitled to part of it in case of divorce. It's a valuable business, built by generations. I couldn't risk losing it." The coldness with which he confessed everything terrified me more than any explosion of anger. "And Isabella? And her baby, your son?" Isabella understood that our affair was just fun. She forced the issue by purposely getting pregnant. Tried to corner me. His voice showed no remorse. "She killed herself, Theodore, jumped from the bridge. Regrettable, but it wasn't my fault. She was unstable, too emotional." The lie was so blatant I almost laughed. "And Claire, was she also unstable? Did she also force the issue?" "I have her letters too, Theodore. I know what happened in 1953. For the first time, I saw a flash of concern in his eyes. He didn't know I had discovered about Claire. "Where? Where did you find them?" "In the attic chest, the one you thought I would never open." "I know everything, Theodore. About the tonic, about the women, about the house you prepared for Isabella." The mention of the secret house made him pale completely. He rose abruptly, knocking over the cup. "You were there? How dare you invade my property?" "Your property? I thought we had no secrets, that everything that was yours was mine too. Isn't that what you promised at the altar?" He started pacing the room, running his hands through his hair, visibly disturbed. He was no longer the calm and respected pharmacist, but a cornered man. "What do you intend to do?" he finally asked, his voice trembling for the first time. "Justice," I replied simply. "Justice?" He let out a bitter laugh. "And who will believe you? I'm the most respected man in this town. You're just the frustrated wife who couldn't have children. They'll think you've gone mad with bitterness." "I have proof, Theodore, lots of proof, and they're no longer just with me." That stopped him. His eyes narrowed, assessing if I was bluffing. What proof? The original letters, the tonic analysis, photographs of the house, witnesses who know everything, and I sent copies to people who can do something about it. He advanced toward me, grabbing my arms forcefully. Who did you send them to? What have you done, you fool? I showed no fear, although my heart was beating uncontrollably. If you do anything to me, it will be worse for you. Everything will come to light immediately. He released me, backing away as if he had received a shock. I realized that for the first time in our marriage, I had power over him. What do you want? He asked, defeated. I want a divorce. I want half of everything, including the pharmacy. Not out of greed, but for justice. 12 years of my life, Theodore. 12 years that you stole from me. Divorce? He seemed genuinely shocked. You know the scandal that would cause? A divorced woman in this town? I prefer the scandal to what you did to Isabella and Claire, the contraceptive tonic you gave your wife. Choose carefully, Theodore. He sat down, visibly shaken. I thought I had won, that he would yield. That's when I noticed a change in his look, something dangerous, calculating. I need to think. Give me a few days. No, tomorrow I'll contact a lawyer. The time for your games is over. I got up to leave the room, but he blocked my way. You don't understand what you're doing. If all this comes to light, we'll both lose everything. Think carefully, Eleanor. There's no possible agreement. Not after what I've discovered. He tried one last resort. The manipulation that worked for so many years. Ellie, my love, I'm sorry. Isabella was a mistake. Claire, too. I can change. We can start over. We can even have a child. If that's what you want. I looked at him with pity. How could I have loved this man for so long? How did I not see the mask he wore? It's too late, Theodore. Tomorrow I'll talk to a lawyer. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to sleep in the guest room. I managed to get past him and go upstairs. I locked the guest room door and pushed the dresser against it as a precaution. I didn't sleep that night. Sitting in the chair by the window, I remained alert to every sound in the house. In the early morning, I heard footsteps in the hallway. The doorknob turned gently, testing if it was locked. Then, silence. Moments later, I heard the car starting. From the window, I saw Theodore leaving in a hurry. It was 3:00 a.m. I don't know what he was planning to do, but I feared the worst. As soon as dawn broke, I packed a small suitcase with the essentials, some clothes, documents, the little money I had secretly saved over the years. I wouldn't take anything valuable, nothing that could be used against me later. As I was going out the door, I found David arriving to open the pharmacy. Mrs. Williams, are you all right? You look pale. I'm fine, David. Have you seen Theodore today? No, ma'am. I thought it strange that the pharmacy was still closed. The doctor is never late. If you hear from him, say I went to visit my cousin in Lancaster. I'll be back in a few days. It was a lie, of course. I had no cousin in Lancaster. In fact, I had no close relatives anywhere. Another reason why Theodore chose me, I realize now. A woman with no family, no one to protect her. I took the 7:30 train to Philadelphia. During the journey, I constantly looked out the window, fearing to see Theodore at some station. My plan was to continue south, to Washington, D.C., where no one knew me. I would start over there with another name if necessary. In Philadelphia, before taking the connection south, I decided to do one last thing. I went to St. Mercy Hospital again. I needed to know more about Isabella, to better understand who this woman was, who, without knowing, shared such a tragic connection with me. At reception, the same bespectacled lady recognized me. You came back, still upset about Nurse Isabella. Yes, did she have family? Someone who took care of the funeral? A younger sister, Beatrice, came from her parents' farm in the countryside. Poor girl, she was devastated. They never imagined Isabella would do something like this. Do you know where I can find this sister? I'd like to offer my condolences. She hesitated, but something in my expression must have convinced her. She's staying at Mrs. Carmen's boarding house on Maple Street, 3 blocks from here, but I don't know if she's still in the city. I thanked her and headed to the boarding house. It was a simple place, but clean and well kept. Mrs. Carmen, a robust lady with gray hair, informed me that Beatrice was still staying there, but would leave on the afternoon train. Can I speak with her? It's about her sister. Room 8, end of the hall. The poor thing has hardly left her room. I knocked softly on the door. A young woman about 20 years old opened it. Her eyes were red from crying. It was impressive how much she resembled Isabella from the photographs I had seen. The same dark hair, the same large eyes. Yes? She asked suspiciously. Beatrice. My name is Mary. I used my mother's name as a precaution. I knew your sister. I'm so sorry for what happened. Did you work at the hospital with her? No. Our connection is more complicated. May I come in? I have something important to tell you. She hesitated but opened the door. The small room was messy, with half-packed suitcases on the bed. I'm going home today. I can't bear to stay in this city where Isabella... Her voice failed. I know it's difficult, but I need to ask you something. Did your sister mention the father's name? A man named Theodore? Beatrice's look changed instantly. Surprise, then anger. How do you know about him? Who are you really? I took a deep breath. It was time for the truth. I'm his wife. What happened next would completely change the course of my life. And I could never have imagined that my meeting with Beatrice would be the beginning of a journey of redemption and justice that would last for decades. I'll never forget the expression on Beatrice's face when I revealed I was Theodore's wife. A whirlwind of emotions passed through her eyes. Shock, anger, confusion, and finally, intense curiosity. His wife, she whispered, backing up a few steps. You came here for what? To accuse me, to defend that monster? No, I replied calmly, although my heart was racing. I came because I just discovered everything about Isabella, about the baby, about his lies. I came because, in a way, I'm also a victim of Theodore. I opened my purse and showed her the copies of Isabella's letters I had brought with me. Beatrice took them with trembling hands, immediately recognizing her sister's handwriting. Where did you get these? He buried them in our backyard every night at 3 a.m. That's how I found out. For almost 2 hours, we sat in that small boarding house room, Beatrice and I sharing our stories. I told her about the contraceptive tonic, about the 12 years believing I was sterile, about Claire's letters, about the house prepared for Isabella. She told me how her sister met Theodore, how he seduced her with promises of a future together, how he convinced her to keep the relationship secret. He said his wife was sterile and bitter, that the marriage was just a facade, that as soon as the baby was born, he would ask for a divorce, Beatrice explained, wiping away tears. Isabella believed him, believed until the end. Until when she discovered the house, I asked, remembering the more recent letters I found there. Beatrice nodded sadly. He showed her the house 2 months ago, said everything was ready for them to live together. Isabella was radiant. She bought the layette for the baby, chose colors to paint the room. Then, suddenly, he started to back away, said he needed more time, that complications had arisen with the divorce. There was no divorce, I whispered. There never was. We discovered that when they found her body. Beatrice's voice broke. There was a letter explaining everything. The police went looking for him, but he showed documents proving he was at a pharmacists' convention in New York that day. He had an alibi for everything. Perfect, as always. A chill ran down my spine. Theodore was even more calculating than I had imagined. He had protected himself against any suspicion. What do you intend to do now? Beatrice asked. Run away, start over somewhere else, and seek justice if I can. She studied me for a moment, then got up decisively. I have something to show you. From a locked suitcase, Beatrice took out a blue leather-bound notebook. Isabella's diary. My sister recorded everything here, from her first meeting with Theodore to her last days. Names, dates, promises, everything. Including about the medicine he gave her when there was a complication with the pregnancy. She had bleeding in the 5th month. He said it was medication to strengthen the baby. But later she discovered it was something to ensure everything went well if she decided to terminate the pregnancy on her own. I leafed through the diary with trembling hands. Everything was documented in detail in Isabella's delicate handwriting. Irrefutable proof, not just of the betrayal, but of unethical medical practices. Why didn't you show this to the police? I did, but they said it was the word of an unbalanced woman against that of an exemplary citizen. Without physical evidence, without witnesses, the diary alone wasn't enough. And when I mentioned the medicine, the sheriff said there was no way to prove that Theodore had given it to her, or that it was dangerous. She was a nurse, she could have access to any medication. That's what they said. We looked at each other, two women united by the pain caused by the same man. At that moment, something changed inside me. The idea of simply running away and starting over somewhere else no longer seemed enough. Beatrice, what if we combined our evidence? I have the letters, the photographs, the tonic analysis. You have the diary. Together, maybe we can get justice. Her eyes shone with renewed hope. How? Let's go to the State Board of Pharmacy, not the local police, who might be influenced by Theodore's position, but directly to the authorities that regulate his profession. A pharmacist who adulterates medications, who uses his knowledge to deceive his own wife and potentially harm a pregnant woman, that's too serious to be ignored. That same afternoon, instead of heading south as planned, Beatrice and I took a taxi to the State Board of Pharmacy in the central area of Philadelphia. We carried with us all the evidence, my letters and photographs, Isabella's diary, samples of the tonic. The imposing building of the board, with its marble columns and wide staircase, intimidated me for a moment. Who were we? Two women from a small town, against the system, against the word of a respected man. But it was too late to back down. If we did nothing, Theodore would continue his life with impunity, perhaps finding another woman to deceive, another life to destroy. We were initially received with suspicion. The secretary looked at our simple clothes, at our determined expressions, and hesitated before directing us to Dr. August Mitchell, ethics director of the board. Dr. Mitchell was a man in his 60s, gray hair, a stern expression behind heavy-framed glasses. He listened to our story with initial skepticism, but as we presented the evidence, especially the tonic analysis and the detailed records in Isabella's diary about the medication given during pregnancy, his expression changed. If what you're saying is true, this is a very serious case of professional misconduct, he finally said, adjusting his glasses. A pharmacist using his knowledge to deceive, to manipulate medications for unethical purposes, this goes against everything our profession stands for. It's the truth, I affirmed, maintaining my composure despite the internal turmoil. Every word, every piece of evidence. He looked at us for a long time, as if assessing our sincerity. Then he called his secretary. Cancel my afternoon appointments and ask Dr. Rivers to come here immediately. Dr. Rivers was the board's legal advisor. Together with Dr. Mitchell, he carefully analyzed all our evidence, asking detailed questions, taking notes. The process was exhausting, taking hours, but we didn't back down. By late afternoon, Dr. Mitchell made his decision. We will open a formal investigation against Theodore Williams. Based on the evidence presented, there are sufficient indications of ethical and illegal violations that warrant a rigorous investigation. Meanwhile, as a precautionary measure, his license to practice as a pharmacist will be suspended. It was more than we expected. Beatrice squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with contained tears. How long will this investigation take? I asked. A few weeks, perhaps months. We'll have to send inspectors to Pine Hollow, collect testimonies, analyze the medications from the pharmacy. And in the meantime, he'll know it was us. I fear for my safety. Dr. Mitchell exchanged glances with Dr. Rivers. The latter cleared his throat and leaned forward. Mrs. Williams, what you've brought goes beyond ethical issues of pharmacy. There are potential crimes here. Fraud, adulteration of medications, even contributory negligence to Ms. Vincent's death. I strongly recommend that you go to the state police, not the local sheriff's office. We left the board with a bittersweet feeling. On one hand, we had managed to initiate the process of justice. On the other, our path would be long and potentially dangerous. "Where will you stay tonight?" Beatrice asked as we walked down the street, the sun already setting on the horizon. "I don't know. I was planning to take the train south, but now—" "Come with me to my parents' farm. It's a few hours from here in the countryside. You'll be safe there while the investigation happens." It was a tempting offer, a safe refuge, away from Theodore, but something inside me hesitated. "And your parents? What will they say when they find out who I am?" "They'll say you're a victim, just like Isabella, and they'll be grateful that you're seeking justice when you could have simply run away." That night I took the train with Beatrice to the countryside. The Vincent farm was in a verdant valley, 2 hours from the small station. It was a simple place, but welcoming. A large wooden house, orchards, a crystalline stream cutting through the property. Beatrice's parents, Mr. Jerome and Mrs. Constance, welcomed me with a hospitality I didn't expect. When they learned who I was, I saw the shock on their faces, but also genuine compassion. "This house is yours for as long as you need, child," said Mrs. Constance, pressing my hands in hers, calloused from work. "No one will find you here." For 3 weeks, I lived in that refuge, helping with farm chores, sharing meals with the Vincent family, learning about Isabella's childhood through the stories they told. It was as if, even after her death, I finally got to know the woman who, unknowingly, shared so many years with me, loving the same man, being deceived by the same lies. At the end of July, we received a visit from 2 inspectors from the State Board of Pharmacy. They came to the farm to update us on the investigation. The pharmacy was temporarily closed for investigation, one of them informed us. We found several irregularities in the medications. Some contained undeclared substances, others were mislabeled. The most serious were the bottles of tonic that you described. We confirmed it contained a combination of herbs and substances with a potent contraceptive effect. "Theodore?" I asked, fearing the answer. The inspectors exchanged worried looks. "That's the complicated part, ma'am. When we arrived in Pine Hollow with the temporary closure order, he had already disappeared. No one knows his whereabouts. The pharmacy was being cared for by the assistant, David." A chill ran down my spine. Theodore disappeared meant he could be anywhere, maybe even looking for me. "The state police have been notified," continued the inspector. "They're treating the case as potentially criminal now, especially after analyzing Ms. Vincent's diary and the medical report on her death." That news changed everything. In the following days, a state police detective, Sergeant Martin, came to the farm to take my formal statement. The case was taking on increasingly serious contours. "Mrs. Williams, based on everything you've told us and the evidence we have, we're considering the possibility that your husband not only acted unethically as a pharmacist, but may also have indirectly contributed to Ms. Vincent's death through psychological manipulation and potentially through the inadequate medication he provided during her pregnancy." "Will you be able to find him?" I asked. "We're doing our best. We've issued an alert at all state borders and checkpoints, but I must be frank. If he's crossed into another state or country, things get complicated." In the months that followed, I lived in a strange limbo. I couldn't return to Pine Hollow, where everyone knew me as Dr. Williams's wife. I couldn't move forward with my life while the case wasn't resolved. So I remained at the Vincent farm, who welcomed me as if I were part of the family. It was Mrs. Constance who, one day, while we were picking apples in the orchard, asked the question that would change the course of my life. "Eleanor, my child, what do you plan to do when this is all over? What is your dream?" No one had asked me that before. For 12 years, I was just the pharmacist's wife, without my own dreams, without ambitions, beyond having the children that never came. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I never had the chance to find out." "It's never too late," she said, placing a ripe apple in my basket. "I see how you're interested in the natural remedies I prepare, how you ask questions about the herbs, about the formulas. Maybe that's a path." That simple conversation planted a seed in my heart, a seed that years later would bloom in ways I could never have imagined in that sunny orchard. In October 1958, 3 months after my escape, the news we were waiting for finally arrived. Theodore had been found in Canada, trying to cross into Alaska. He was extradited to the United States, where he would face formal charges. The trial would begin in December, and I, who thought I had left everything behind, would have to face again the man who destroyed my life. But this time, I wouldn't be alone. I would have the Vincent family by my side and a determination I never knew I possessed. December 1958 arrived with unusual cold for that time of year. The gray sky over Philadelphia seemed to reflect the tension I felt as I entered the imposing courthouse. I was about to face Theodore for the first time since that night of confrontation in our house. I walked through the cold marble corridors, supported by Beatrice's arm, who never left my side for a moment. The Vincents had become my family in the last few months, an irony of fate that didn't escape me. The family of my husband's lover was now my safe harbor. The courtroom was packed. The case had gained notoriety throughout the state. "The pharmacist who poisoned his wife," said the newspapers in sensationalist headlines that made me shudder. For many, I was just a morbid curiosity, a victim to be observed. For others, especially in Pine Hollow, I was the ungrateful wife who destroyed a respected man's reputation. When I entered the courtroom, I felt dozens of eyes on me. I kept my eyes ahead, maintaining the dignity I had sworn not to lose. And then finally, I saw Theodore. He was sitting next to his lawyer, wearing an impeccable suit as always. But there was something different. His eyes, once confident and calculating, now seemed opaque, defeated. 3 months in jail awaiting trial had ended his arrogant posture. When our gazes met, he looked away first. A small victory that I silently savored. The prosecutor, Mr. Ramirez, was a meticulous man who had prepared the case with impressive dedication. For weeks, he worked with Beatrice and me, reviewing every detail, every piece of evidence. The charges against Theodore were serious: fraud, adulteration of medications, unethical practice of the pharmaceutical profession, and the most serious of all, involuntary manslaughter for Isabella's death. When I was called to testify, my legs trembled, but my voice remained firm. I told everything: the 12 years taking the contraceptive tonic he gave me, the discovery of the letters, the house prepared for Isabella, the final confrontation. I omitted nothing, not even my own naivety in blindly trusting the man who had sworn to love and protect me. "Mrs. Williams," asked the prosecutor, "when you discovered that the fertility tonic was actually a contraceptive, what was your reaction?" "First disbelief, then a deep pain." "Imagine, sir, spending 12 years believing there's something wrong with your body, something that prevents you from fulfilling the dream of being a mother. Suffering the pitying looks, the malicious comments, the pressure from society, and then discovering it was all a deliberate lie, that the person you trusted most was poisoning you daily to satisfy his own interests. When the defense attorney tried to discredit me, suggesting I was making up these accusations out of revenge for discovering the infidelity, I maintained my composure. "Sir, if it was just a matter of betrayal, I could have divorced quietly, could have moved on with my life. But we're talking about a man who used his pharmaceutical knowledge to manipulate medications, to deceive not just me, but other women. A man whose actions led a young woman to suicide. This goes far beyond an extramarital affair." The most impactful testimony, however, came from an unexpected source. Claire Mitchell, the woman from the 1953 letters, who had attempted suicide after being abandoned by Theodore, was located by the prosecutor on the West Coast. Now married and a mother of 2 children, she traveled 3 days by train to testify. When Claire entered the courtroom, the silence was absolute. She walked with dignity to the witness stand, avoiding looking at Theodore. Her testimony was devastating. He told me his wife was sterile and bitter, that the marriage was just a formality. When I got pregnant, he promised we would be together. Later, When I started pressuring him, he gave me a medicine he said was to protect the baby from complications. I had intense bleeding that same night. I lost my child in the 6th month of pregnancy. The entire courtroom held its breath as she continued. Afterward, desperate and alone, I tried to take my own life. I survived by a miracle. And do you know what he did? He visited me in the hospital, not to comfort me, but to make me sign a document, exempting him from any responsibility for medical complications. I was weak, confused from the medications. I signed without understanding. That document that Theodore believed to be his protection became one of the most compelling pieces of evidence against him. The prosecutor presented it to the court, along with an analysis by experts who confirmed that the signature had been obtained under questionable circumstances. Over 2 weeks, the trial exposed Theodore's true nature. The assistant, David, testified about irregularities in the pharmacy. Experts confirmed that the tonic contained potent contraceptive substances. The letters, Isabella's diary, the photographs of the house prepared for her, each piece of evidence was a nail in the coffin of Theodore's defense. When it came his turn to testify, he tried to maintain the image of a respectable citizen, victim of a female conspiracy. But under the prosecutor's relentless questioning, his facade began to crack. "Mr. Williams, do you admit to having provided your wife for 12 years with a preparation that contained contraceptive substances while claiming it was a fertility tonic?" After a long pause, he answered, "It was to protect her. A pregnancy would be dangerous for her health. Curious that you never mentioned this to her or to any doctor, and even more curious that you impregnated 2 other women in the same period." It was at this moment that I saw Theodore completely crumble. His once confident face contorted into an expression I would never forget. The expression of a man who finally realizes he won't be able to escape the truth. On the last day of the trial, the judge delivered his sentence. Theodore was found guilty of all charges. He permanently lost his pharmacist's license. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison for the set of crimes and required to pay compensation to me, Isabella's family, and Claire. When the judge's gavel fell, closing the case, I felt an immense weight leave my shoulders. It wasn't joy or satisfied revenge, it was relief. Finally, the truth had prevailed. I left the courthouse that day with a question hammering in my mind. What would I do now with the rest of my life? The answer began to form during the months I continued at the Vincent farm. Mrs. Constance, with her wisdom of medicinal herbs, had planted a seed in me that was now germinating. With part of the compensation I received, I enrolled in a technical pharmacy course in Philadelphia. At 31, I was the oldest student in the class, but also the most dedicated. I spent nights studying, absorbing every piece of information, every formula, with a thirst for knowledge that surprised even myself. Why pharmacy? A curious professor once asked me about my motivation after everything I had been through. Because I want to transform the knowledge that almost destroyed me into something that can help other people, especially women. In 1962, I graduated with distinction. That same year, using the rest of the compensation and a small loan, I opened my own compounding pharmacy in a medium-sized town in Pennsylvania, far from Pine Hollow, but not too far from the Vincent farm, which I still considered my home. I called it New Dawn Pharmacy. The name wasn't by chance. It symbolized not just my fresh start, but also the hope of a new day for other women who, like me, faced their own challenges. My differential was specialized care for women. At a time when women's issues were taboo, when many suffered silently with health problems due to shame or lack of information, my pharmacy became a safe space. We developed formulas to alleviate menopause symptoms. We created creams and gels that helped with intimate discomforts. We prepared specific multivitamins for pregnant and nursing women, but above all, we offered information. On Saturdays, the back room of the pharmacy transformed into a small educational center. Women of all ages came to learn about their bodies, about menstrual cycles, about safe contraceptive methods, about healthy pregnancy. In an era without internet, Without easy access to information, those lectures were revolutionary. Knowledge is power, my dears, I always told them. Never let anyone, especially a man, tell you what's happening with your own bodies. In 1968, 10 years after the trial, I received news that shook me. Theodore had been released from prison for good behavior. My first instinct was fear. What if he came after me? But he never appeared. I heard from acquaintances that he had moved to a small town in Oregon where he lived modestly, working as a clerk in a department store. The pharmacy in Pine Hollow had long been sold to pay the compensation and legal costs. The 1970s brought big changes. The feminist movement was gaining strength, and with it a greater awareness of reproductive rights and female autonomy. My work, once viewed with suspicion by some, was now celebrated as pioneering. We expanded New Dawn Pharmacy to 3 branches in neighboring towns. I hired more pharmacists, always prioritizing women who, like me, sought independence in a society still dominated by men. In 1978, at 47, I made a decision that would again change the course of my life. I went back to college to study medicine. It was an immense challenge. The classes, the internships, the sleepless nights studying, all while managing the pharmacies. But when I graduated 6 years later, the feeling of accomplishment surpassed any difficulty. I specialized in gynecology and obstetrics, areas that would allow me to help women even more directly. I opened a clinic next to the main pharmacy, offering care at affordable prices, often free for those who couldn't pay. It was in this clinic that, in 1985, I received a patient who would change my life once more. A 19-year-old girl, pregnant, frightened, and alone. Her name was Valentina Mitchell. Mitchell? I asked, the surname awakening distant memories. Yes, doctor. My mother is Claire Mitchell. She's the one who recommended you. She said if there was one doctor she could fully trust, it was Dr. Eleanor. Claire had sent her daughter to me. The same Claire who testified at the trial, who shared with me the pain of having been deceived by Theodore. She had rebuilt her life, married a good man, had other children, and now entrusted her eldest daughter's care to me. I took care of Valentina throughout her pregnancy. When her daughter was born healthy and strong, she asked me a question that deeply touched my heart. Dr. Eleanor, would you accept being my daughter's godmother, and would you allow me to give her your name? That's how, at 54, I became the godmother of little Eleanor Mitchell. Life, in its infinite wisdom, had given me a form of motherhood I never expected. Through the following decades, I continued expanding my work. The pharmacies grew to a network with 15 units in 3 states. The clinic transformed into a women's health center with diverse specialties and social assistance programs. I created a foundation that offered scholarships to women in vulnerable situations who wished to study pharmacy or medicine. I named it the Isabella Vincent Foundation, a way to honor the one who, unknowingly, had been the catalyst for my transformation. In 1998, 40 years after the trial, I received a letter I never expected. The simple envelope contained just a few lines written in a trembling hand. Eleanor, I'm dying. Terminal cancer. Before departing, I needed to say, I'm sorry for everything. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. Theodore. I didn't respond immediately. For weeks that letter remained on my desk, a ghost from the past resurfacing when I had moved on so long ago. Finally, I sent my reply. Theodore, your greatest punishment is knowing that your attempts to destroy me resulted in thousands of lives saved and transformed. The pain you caused me became purpose. I can't say I forgive you, but I thank life for having transformed that tragedy into something greater than both of us. Eleanor. He died 2 weeks later. I didn't attend the funeral, but I sent flowers, not for him, but for Isabella, and for the baby who was never born, and for that young Eleanor, 27, who found her husband digging in the backyard at 3 a.m. and had the courage to discover what he was burying. Today, at 86, I look back and see how that night changed everything. The pharmacies, the clinics, the foundation, all born from that terrible moment. Thousands of women cared for, hundreds of young women trained with foundation scholarships, dozens of professionals inspired by our work. I never married again, never had biological children, but I have a wonderful goddaughter, little Eleanor, who is now a doctor and runs one of our clinics. I have my foundation daughters, brilliant young women who affectionately call me Grandma Ellie. And I have all of you who have heard my story. What have I learned in all these years? That life can bury deep secrets in our backyards, but the truth always finds a way to the light, and that we can transform our greatest tragedies into strength to help others. The man who tried to prevent me from being a mother led me to be a kind of mother to thousands of helpless women. The pharmacist who used his knowledge to deceive me inspired me to use the same knowledge to empower others. This, my dears, is what I call divine justice. Not the one that just punishes the guilty, but the one that transforms the victim into an agent of change. Thank you for accompanying me on this journey. If my story touches even one person's heart, if it inspires a single woman to seek her truth and her strength, all this sharing will have been worthwhile. And always remember, no matter what's buried in your backyard, whether a lie, a pain, or a secret, you have the power to dig it up, face it, and transform it. With all my love, this is Eleanor Williams saying goodbye until the next video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And if this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments. I read them all with much care.